Hello, everyone. On today's episode, tools to simplify budgeting and tracking finances. Welcome to the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. This is Choose FI.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, guys, very excited to dive into this week's episode. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I am doing quite well. Yeah, what's going on in your world?
Well, okay, so it's mid-April right now, and I think it's time to confess a fail, and hopefully we'll round this off and call it a fail forward. So I was very excited about all my gardening best practices. I wouldn't say I was humble bragging, but I was certainly sharing a lot in early March. And anybody that lives on the East Coast and certainly in the Virginia area will know that March snuck up on us, and at the very end of March passed us a 2+ day frost. So 2+ days of extreme chill, ice, and frost, and everything that I labored in love to plant in my backyard for the sole purpose, well, not the sole purpose, but largely to share with you guys my progress, was killed, was just absolutely decimated. In fact, it was such a surprise and shock to me that my brother came over to the house and I wanted to show him my garden and went out to go look at all this work. I mean, like months of work. And I literally could see nothing. Yeah, like the day before prior, like I had, a foot tall growth on these plants, these vegetables that were growing. And then I was like, wait, where'd they go? And I immediately thought it's the rabbits. Peter Rabbit has come after my stuff. And let me tell you, you have a lot more sympathy for Mr. McGregor when that's the scenario. But after going investigating, they just died off over 2 days.
Oh my goodness. So we had a hard freeze a couple nights in a row and everything died like that quickly.
A couple stragglers here and there, but 90% of my labor looks like it was at least outside. No, I'm going to, there's a positive end to the story. I don't get too stuck there, but I'm telling you, it was demoralizing to see that. And, the immediate thought was, I have failed.
Yeah.
I have failed. I should have known that March is that sneaky month. I should have waited a whole nother month. I just did not believe that around March 25th, the weather was going to drop by quite literally 40 or 50 degrees. I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah, we had already gotten daytime highs in the 70s and beyond at that point. So yeah, I mean, it's understandable. But I would certainly almost like not take offense, but like at your thought of like, I have failed. Like that doesn't seem like what you're doing here. And I suspect you've come around on that. But again, as we were talking about over the last couple of months on the podcast, this seems to be more of like, hey, I want to get outside. Hey, I want to spend more time with my kids, learning new things. I want to see if I can do this, as opposed to this is going to be the most cost-effective way to, I don't know, have potatoes in the house or something absurd. Like the most cost-effective way to have potatoes in the house is to go to the grocery store in all likelihood. But that never seemed like what you were doing this
cost-effective way is to go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
The thing is, you're probably not wrong. Yeah, it's okay.
But that doesn't invalidate everything you did.
No, not at all. But it was a momentary blink reaction, right?
Yeah.
And the reason I come back to that is those identity statements. I have failed, or I am a failure, or the fact that you've had this narrative that I have black thumbs, right? Like as opposed to green thumbs, I have black thumbs. And I kill anything that I try to do, anything that I try to grow. I just can't do it. That identity statement. How many times do we have those narratives throughout all these other aspects of our life, things that we just say, well, I can't do this because I'm bad at it, X, Y, Z, as opposed to pausing on that and saying, well, what did we learn from that? Like if I were to actually take a more holistic approach, I say, I actually did a lot of things right. The reason those plants had grown as much as they did at this particular point was that I had started them in my garage and I had gotten some grow lights and I allowed that, I'd created this potting soil mixture where they were growing indoors successfully in all of February when it was completely frozen. And then I made a judgment that I thought it was about time that I could get them, outside at this point. And I was wrong. I was wrong on the timing. What lesson did I learn from that? Well, I learned let's just be on the safe side and wait till April, right? That's one lesson so that you carry that forward. I also learned that I was very successful at growing these inside, and that means I can actually reclaim some of the growing season inside. I also learned that, like, if you were just to go plant seeds outside, the number of seeds on the one end, the seeds that they call it hardening. So they're hardened. They're used to the light. They're used to the soil. They're growing in spite of it. They're forming their roots, but you're not going to get like a 100%, grow rate. Not every seed is going to make it because the temperatures are harsh outside. The wind is harsh. The change in chill is harsh. The soil, especially if it's a first year garden, the microbial life is not where it needs to be. So on the one end, I could get a 100% grow rate inside under grow lights, under perfect conditions. But then you have to figure out this hardening process to transition your perfect environment plants indoors to this outdoor. And that's another problem to start solving. So it wasn't just a failure. It was rather recognizing what didn't work and how much worked up to that point, dissecting that and then figuring out what are we going to do going forward. And then if you don't latch onto that failure identity, it's saying, well, actually, I have a whole nother batch of different things growing inside. And if I can't grow winter squash because whatever, maybe I can grow potatoes because they grow under the ground and they're going to be a lot less susceptible to, the types of chill that we have here in Virginia. At the end of the day, you're going to grow something. I am going to have a yield of something on the other side. And this was not a failure, but something that didn't work that gave me additional data to adjust course.
No, that makes sense. And I would actually ask you to go back and replay the last 3 minutes of the podcast for yourself once this is published and hear all the knowledge you possess about gardening now that if you had rewound a year ago, you would have known virtually none of that. So, I mean, the amount that you've learned about something that really interests you, I mean, that's the sauce, right? Like, that's the secret here. And I would counsel everybody listening, it doesn't have to be gardening, right? But this is what we talk about, just having an open mind, exploring the world. There's so much to learn. And sadly, so many of us we stay in our little lane. And I fall prey to this, certainly. And we all do, right? It's easy to stay in your lane, but it's never been easier to learn something. I mean, Jonathan, you picked this all up from YouTube and Google, I imagine, right?
I did. I did. What an opportunity. Like, all of us have a certain amount of time. Let's say it's variable, but we have, 40 to 100 years on this planet, right? The average is somewhere in there. And to say that I'm only going to do what, various institutions give me permission to learn through a formalized education process, what a waste when you can fail forward with all the things that you learn on YouTube. You can invalidate things just by what doesn't work and then dissect the part that didn't work and get better information and use that process. Use any success you get in one area of your life to cultivate that skill of getting the information and turning that information, curating it, synthesizing it into something that you can actually use and then taking action on it. Look, we live in a world where information is ubiquitous. You're overwhelmed by information. Your job, our job as individuals, is curation, synthesis, and action, right? Not all information is equally valuable. Your ability to progress, your ability to grow as a person and be able is really how quickly you can take all of the information, figure out the piece that's going to be useful for you, and then take action on that, and then take the output of that, whether it worked or didn't work, to iterate to the eventual success that you will get.
Right. And that iterative process, that's the key, right? Because like you said, knowledge is out there, it's ubiquitous. You obviously have to put in a lot of effort to learn, but then it's not just, okay, it's this one time and then it's make or break, right? Failure or success. In all likelihood, it was almost invariable that something was going to happen with your first harvest, right? And if you said, hey, again, that identity statement, I'm the type of person that, dot, dot, dot. And if you've always had it that I have black thumbs, as you said, and this proved you right, you're going to give up. But if I'm the type of person that can learn anything or who sticks with it and wants to keep trying, well, that's an entirely different identity statement, right? And I'm really impressed with you, Jonathan, I mean, this obviously didn't go as well as it could have, but I suspect you're going to come back stronger from this.
I'm coming back stronger. So the sweet potatoes are now in the ground.
Ooh, baby.
And I did the sweet potatoes right. Now, I'm not okay. We could spend all day here, but the whole point, we'll talk about it another time. The point was adjustments and failing
Yep.
forward. And like when you come back to your financial life, I can't think of a better opportunity to assess the prior year. I mean, maybe January 1st, going to January 1st, you can make an argument, but tax season for those of us that are income earners that have a complex financial life, tax season is a litmus test for your whole prior year. If you're stressed going into tax season, there's an opportunity at the point of filing to say, how am I going to course correct? What changes am I going to make? And also, very, very specifically, and there's the nuance here. There's what we think we make, and then there's actually what we brought home at the point of filing. And if everything is staying constant or very minute changes, that filing gives us a very accurate look at what our take-home pay was over the prior year and likely what it will be going into the next year. And that's very different as opposed to like, how much do you make? And you say, oh, I make, I'm a pharmacist and I make $120,000 a year. That's two very, very different things. Or I'm the person that lives on this a month, but I get a $6,000 refund every year. Very, very different pictures. And so like, I just wanted to iterate. I was like huge, when I got done with the season, I was like, this is worth the conversation. And there's a best practice that can be put in place here to do better, each year, to have a simpler life each additional year, to have a less stressful tax filing season, and to be able to plan your spending out the following year with more precision based on those inputs and the output right around, middle of April.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And like you said, ultimately, the proof is in the pudding when it comes to your tax return, right? You get your W-2, you get your 1099s. It's easy to say, oh, I'm invested in this and it gets me such and such return. Or like you said, I am a pharmacist and I make X amount, $120,000. And you think you know what you take home. You think you know, even down to, oh, I'm in this tax bracket, right? So many of us say that, but we in the United States have a marginal taxation system. So it's a huge difference ultimately between what your last dollar, your marginal dollar of income is taxed at versus your effective tax rate, which is basically all of the tax you pay divided by that gross income. So this is really a time to look at your financial life even more so than, Jonathan, like you said, at January 1st. And I would counsel, and I do this personally, every quarter I look at my net worth and I look at my income statement. So I'm kind of tracking my finances on a roughly quarterly basis. And it is all well and good to get that, okay, December 31st rolls around, January 1st, and I go in and I update everything. And you get a good bit of information from that. But again, when you get those 1099s rolling in from that investment that you put some money into, that, oh, in theory, I think I have a 4% return, but then you actually see what the distributions were or whatever. Like, again, that is a proof is in the pudding type scenario. And Jonathan, more importantly, really than anything, is action, 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 right? That's what we always counsel is it's great to have the information, but if you don't take action on it, then it's really all for naught. So I think this is a perfect time post tax filing, and we will talk about that, especially in light of last week's episode. But post tax filing, you can say, hey, look, I think my income is going to be roughly the same next year, and I got this massive tax refund. Is that something I want next year? Or do I want to make an adjustment, right? Like you have different options from here forward.
That's fantastic. So let's actually kind of rewind just for a second because we're talking, I believe it was last week around, can I get an extension, please? That was the title of the episode. And we were talking through the implications of filing for a tax extension. And one thing we both mentioned, I think both of us ended up filing for an extension. But what was interesting about that is I kind of did that in anticipation. But once I had all my documents and I felt very comfortable, I just went ahead and even though I had the extension approved, I just went ahead and filed my taxes. And based on those inputs, I realized that I was going to, because I think we have this goal and some people have hit it, like this goal of what if you could get your tax, like a lot of times people, sorry, I'm going to get to the point. I'm going to get to the point, Brad. I'm going to get to the point. But there's two sidebars I need to hit. One is the people that
sidebar to the sidebar.
There's two sidebars. All right. A lot of people get very excited about the massive tax refund. I got $6,000 back this year. Every year, I make sure that I get the big refund, and that's what I use for my vacation each year. And to the degree that that is a forced savings plan and you have no other willpower to save, to some degree, you have to respect the process. But Brad, structurally, and I'm going to relinquish my sidebar to you because I just know what a soapbox it is for you. The large tax refund is suboptimal.
The large tax refund, certainly for people in the financial independence community, is highly suboptimal because, in essence, you are giving the government an interest free loan throughout an entire year, up to potentially 15 months. So it seems less than ideal when you could have been investing that money all along, right? And earning a return on that, as opposed to you are giving the government an interest free loan on something that, again, if you do that once, or you have some big change in your financial life, okay, you get a refund. It certainly feels better than having to pay a large amount with your tax return. So I get that. But to do that year after year seems highly suboptimal, especially for people in the financial independence community. Because, like you said, the forced savings for many people who would potentially fritter away that money in tiny little pieces throughout the year, it sure is better to get a big tax refund, $3, $4, $6,000, something like that. That feels great, and they can do something substantial with that. That's for kind of the regular population with their finances. But for the FI community, who's a little more optimized, to put it mildly, I think we can do better. So I don't think for most of us in the FI community, a humongous tax refund is something that we should aspire to.
And then conversely, owing a lot has its own challenges, and there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of choices you make throughout the year that seem good at the time. And when you get to tax season, you say that was not worth the squeeze. Having, 45 pages of transactions with, basis points that you're handing in to get $15 in profit just doesn't feel great at tax filing season, which can be a point of saying, do I want to go through that again? Do I consider this next year just buying companies and positions that I'm very confident in and holding them for the long term because I believe in long-term future. We've talked about this before. That simplifies things. Also, if you're self-employed, estimated payments, what an opportunity based on how much you owe to, get ahead of this and figure out how can I really have a very clear picture of how much I'm going to need to set aside using safe harbor rules and make sure that that's there. That way I don't pay any additional penalties that I don't need to pay, which effectively keeps more money in your pocket. Also, just looking at very inconsistencies maybe in real estate, because real estate has its own tax laws that are around that and can complicate things as well. Really having a sense for what do the implications from last year's tax filing tell me about actions that I should take this year. Now, here's where I'm going with this. Most of us that are on this path, especially those of us that are on this journey with a partner, there's one individual that loves the numbers and the other one that tolerates the spreadsheets. Like they like the story, they buy the vision, they like the outcome that they're working toward. The spreadsheets do not light them up. But that does not mean that they don't want to know what's going on with the financial picture. They just don't like the spreadsheets. They want to know the story. What is the story of where our financial picture is going over the next year? And my wife is this person. And it'd be very easy to confuse the not wanting to look at your spreadsheet calculations and not having an appreciation for your macro expressions that you have going on behind the scenes with, be very easy to confuse that with not being interested in finances, which is fundamentally untrue. My wife feels more secure when she knows what the plan is for our money over, the following year. And so one of the things that I really wanted to do going into, the next 10 months or so, or the next, whatever it is, 8 months of this, 2022 is simplify our financial life, get as many of the variables out of the way, I am an entrepreneur, Brad's an entrepreneur. We have lumpy income, simplify all of that, and really, really use whatever this tax filing told me to say, this is what our actual, estimated income is projected month. This is the most accurate representation of what our take home pay is over the next 8 months. And then once you have that accurate picture, this is our core expenses. This is what our core expenses are over that same period of time. And this is what our opportunity is in terms of the money that we can choose to do, with what we want. And there's a few things that we've taken off the table. Like we don't discuss how much we're putting in the 401k. We max out the 401k each year. So we're not really making the choice to fund that or not. That's not a variable. And that's a luxury. It's a privilege. It's something we've worked for over time, but that's not really one of the things we're including. We're looking at, the 401k gets funded ahead of time. We have some amount of estimated income. that hits our bank account each month. We have some amount that we're going to need to set aside for taxes if we're going to avoid underpayment penalties, et cetera. And then we have a set of structural expenses that we need to account for. And then we're going to have a difference on the other side. And we decide, is that going to go into taxable investments? Is that going to go into savings? Is that going to go into, paying down things like a mortgage? Is that going to go into, luxury spends or big projects on the house or, things that we value? That's where I want to have the conversation. I'm putting a safety net, around the things we've already decided are locked. I'm simplifying the variables that she really doesn't care about and don't affect the outcome. And then together, we're going to sit down and this is actually building on Joe's conversation. Joe Saul-Sehy, Stacking Benjamins, likes to do his conversation with his wife every week. It doesn't need to be every week for us. A monthly conversation, a big conversation now, and then a smaller iteration on that in the coming months. We're committing to that. And this is just the opportunity to lock that and say in stone and say, this is important to us and it's important to us for these reasons.
Yeah, Jonathan, I love that. It's interesting because I think we went into this thinking in terms of a budget, but I'm seeing this actually as you're describing it more as kind of like that one time a year where you have your macro investment strategy session with your wife, right? So this is really okay, what's going on in our financial life at a super high level? Okay, what's our income? What is our tax situation? And then just take a very quick look at, like you said, those structural expenses, which that doesn't take a long time to put together. And then you've got, hopefully, in your case, you have money left over. And then we need to make some decisions in terms of where is that money going? What do we want to do with it? What are our priorities? Right? Because even in there, you included paying down a mortgage, right? That's an investment decision, no matter how you look at it. There is a return on that because there's opportunity costs. First off, you could be doing something else with that money. But if you're paying down your mortgage, there is an interest rate that in essence, you're getting that return, right? Whatever the interest rate is on your mortgage. So let's be clear that like all of those decisions, those are investing decisions, right? Like you said, I'm going to max out my 401k. That's an investing decision. We have a healthcare plan, health insurance plan that gives us the ability to have an HSA. That's an investing decision. Whether I put this into real estate or stocks or mutual funds, whatever it may be, all investing decisions. And it sounds to me, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like this is kind of the perfect opportunity to have that one big conversation. And then from there on, every month or whatever cadence you want, you can kind of update it and have a sense of, okay, where are we now? Where are we in June or August, as opposed to that conversation we had in April? Is that roughly accurate?
That's it. That's it. Yeah. And what really, sets us up to continue this conversation with some of the tools is just that. Like these are tools. They're not binding. There's tools, software, and analog tools that are out there that you can use as best practices to inform these conversations. If you love spreadsheets, maybe you just build your own. No tool can ever do what you have envisioned in your mind. And so you build your own. Conversely, there are tools that I am using and tools that I've used that are going to inform this. And I'm going to walk you through the simplest version. We're going to go through some free and some paid options and just talk about how and why they might be beneficial depending on where you are. Because frankly, these are ones that I'm considering or ones that I'm actually planning on using. And the first one I want to start with is just, we don't need to overcomplicate this. This is not something that you're submitting to an accountant for an audit. This is something you're using as a conversation builder, and you and your partner, if that's the case, or just you, are using this just as a place to start. And actually, I don't think we've ever done this before, but I'm going to point to a spreadsheet that was provided to us by our government for balancing a budget, which is amazing because our government hasn't had a balanced budget in a century. Maybe they don't know they have the sheet. But anyways, that's a sidebar. This sheet is actually really good. It was created by, I think it's a Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, and it's a well-being monthly budget. Now, hear me on this. On our show, this is episode 374. I'm going to mention some links and I'm going to mention some tools. I will make sure for you that you can just access either the links to go to these, or in this case, it's a PDF that's on a government website. The link will quite simply be provided for you on the show notes for this episode, choosify.com/374. Now, having said that, this is a worksheet. And what's really cool about this is it's a PDF worksheet, so you could print it off. Alternatively, when you pull it up, it actually has fillable columns in it. And so, you can type it in on your computer and it's going to have a place for you to list your income, whether it's a job, it's benefits, various types of financial support, other income. On the other side, it allows for types of spending. So housing, utilities, groceries, health expenses, transportation, education, childcare, cell phone, internet, cable, service and animals, pets, debt payments, other spending. It is just a very, very simple and easy to visualize what you make. So your income minus what you spend, right? And then it will provide for you, the difference on the other side. A phenomenal single page worksheet that you could use as a simple springboard to start this conversation. So I think this is fantastic. I think everybody should know about it. Obviously, you could just do the math yourself, but I think it is a comprehensive look at the things that if I were asking someone, hey, how much do you make? This is what I would want to know. And if I want to know what they would spend, I would go through most of these categories.
Yeah, it's really the perfect starting point for a budget. And like you said, you can always get more complex from here. And we're going to talk about that. But yeah, I mean, these 10 categories of spending plus just a generic 11th other and your income, it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. That's the beautiful thing about a budget is it's really just what's coming in and what's going out. And how can you visually see that in the simplest form possible? Right? Complexity does not equal good in most cases. Just in life is kind of my motto. But I mean, this is a perfect example. There's 10 line items for your expenses, and you can see that over like a longitudinal study, as we sometimes jokingly say. You can see how this goes forward months and years in the future, which is pretty cool.
Hey, this is Andrew from the Choose FI team. Hope you're enjoying the show. We're going to get right back to it after these quick messages.
So, I think this is just a fabulous place to start. Here's the thing. People get so fixated when we're talking about tracking and we're talking about budgeting. They get so fixated on these variable expenses like, oh, I saved this amount for a vacation, or, oh, I spent this much on gifts, or, oh, I spent, it's whatever it is, home decoration, home improvement, landscaping. And yes, absolutely. That is the most accurate way, if you're going to effectively analyze how much you actually spent. But that's fundamentally different than what your life actually cost. And I think for when you're starting out, it's really important to know how much you're bringing home after you account for your tax implications and maybe like what you've deemed are your critical investments, like your 401k, that sort of thing. What are you bringing home? And then point two, how much your life actually cost. If it came down to it, this is what I have to bring this amount to the table, each and every month for us to be able to take care of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yep.
I have to do not your wants, not all the things that makes life fun and glamorous and just, this is what my life actually, but it's quite literally, what are your financial obligations? Because everything on the other side represents opportunity and it represents a value judgment. And maybe it might be time for reevaluation depending on what your goals are, what your timeline are, how much satisfaction you're getting from the current life as currently constituted. We want to know what that opportunity is on the other side. Now that we know our opportunity, we can say, wow, I have $3,000 a month of potential opportunity. I don't have anything left at the end of my paycheck, but it says I have $3,000 a month of opportunity here. Like I'm not experiencing that. So now, we can go farther and we can say, well, where did that opportunity go?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, most succinctly, where did that money go? Right. I mean, because then you get into a situation where, okay, the numbers aren't adding up. So you need to investigate, right? Because then reality is diverging from what the theoretical reality is. And I think that's the case for a lot of us, right? We look at, okay, what are our expenses? But then we also look at our credit card bill at the end of a month and it's inexplicably higher than we had anticipated. And sometimes, like we say, life is lumpy, right? That's kind of like a choose FI quote. But what it means is things come up all the time. And if you're not accounting for those in some type of miscellaneous area, or even in one of these other 10 categories that it might appropriately be put in, if you're not accounting for that because you don't see it every month, because it's a one time a year, or, oh, it's a quote unquote emergency, but it wasn't really emergency. It was inevitable and you just didn't include it. You really need to account for those things because, like Jonathan said, if you have theoretically $3,000 a month to invest, $36,000 a year, and you're not investing, right? Well, the money had to go somewhere. So you don't beat yourself up about it. That's not the goal of this exercise at all. The goal of this exercise is to figure out, where am I today and how can I move forward most intelligently, and how can I help my financial life the best possible. But you need to be honest, and you need to get to the bottom of, hey, why is this diverging?
Where are they diverging? That's exactly it. So we have this opportunity here, and we got to figure out, this is the point where we can talk about tools. Now, yes, you can keep this very simple. You can just take a look at your bank account and you can make a note of every single transaction that hits your bank account. Now, this could be complicated if you have multiple credit cards, right? Because your spending can be spread out over, several cards. You might need to log into several different accounts to see what that is, but you could just make a note of every transaction on a pen and paper and just sum all those up. Obviously there are tools that are now going to come into place that have been able to do some of this for us. So if we want to scale off pen and paper, we could do the same thing just via an Excel sheet or a Google sheet. And at this point, this is where it gets kind of interesting because we have some options here. We could use like a free Google spreadsheet or a free Excel sheet in order to create some nice templates. So here at Choosify, we actually do have kind of a budget personal finance, master template as an option, but there's plenty of other people that have done something similar, and a lot of them are free as well. Vertex 42, you can look them up, Vertex 42. Again, links will all be on the notes for this episode. They have a series of free spreadsheets that organize your finances in certain ways. And, you're going to probably, just depending on your own personality, you're going to like them more. But again, I just want to point out right here that when you're talking about basic Excel or Google Sheets and you're using these for tracking your finances, specifically, like what did I spend in each category, you're manually entering in your data. And so when we then move to the next layer, and let's not, I don't want to look down my nose at that, Brad. I'm pretty sure, to the degree that you do any tracking at this point, basically everything you do is through manual data entry on Excel or Google Sheets.
Yep, that's absolutely correct. I've been doing that for over a decade now, probably longer. And yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, I know we've talked with Paula Pant about this as well. And there's something nice about kind of manipulating the data yourself, right? Of just like, you're feeling it when you're actually typing it in. I know that sounds silly, but there is something to that. So I personally, I don't go into every line item on my credit card bill. I probably should. And I think that's where a lot of the automated options are really providing a better service, because I basically, like on my income statement, basically the income in, the expenses out, I'm just putting essentially what's running through my regular checking account. That's kind of like the clearinghouse for where my financial life runs off of. So if I have credit card bill for $1,500, that just then gets entered into my spreadsheet. So again, that doesn't provide a ton of information, in all honesty, because it doesn't tell me how much of that was spent at Wegmans, how much of that was spent on that life is lumpy expense, or the ridiculous, I don't know, turning on my in-ground sprinklers at my house, like those little things, like they just get added to that one number. So it's less effective than it could be.
Well, I want to point out there's going to be a framework for approaching this whole tracking and budgeting issue that's going to be probably to some degree dependent on your need to account for every penny, like how
Agreed.
much margin you have. Like, for instance, there are many people listening to this that will have the luxury, the privilege of saying, I'm going to do an anti-budget, right? And this is, I just want to point this out. An anti-budget says, I'm going to make rules around what I'm going to save and invest, and then I'll just spend the rest. I can spend the rest any way I want, but I'm just going to spend the rest. And that is extraordinarily effective. And I think it tilts towards being more appealing towards people that don't really have to work as hard to get to that 30 to 50% savings rate. If the idea of accounting for all of your dollars actually scares you because you're bumping up against struggling to make it to the next pay period and having anything to show for it, that is not going to be as effective. You're going to make the goals to save, and then you're always going to have a negative on the other side. It's not going to be as helpful. So I just want to point out, and I'll give us back to you, Brad, the whole idea of just noting the whole of your spending and the idea of manual entry, but not needing to account for every transaction. It folds very neatly onto the simplified anti-budget,
Yeah.
which is probably a higher income approach.
No, that's completely fair. And yeah, I'm probably being unnecessarily harsh on myself in that, oh, it should be perfect. That's like the old type A part of me, that it may be the accountant's brain, like I should be ticking and tying every dollar. But to your point, does it really matter in my particular financial situation that I'm line iteming everything in that $1,500 credit card bill.
And for everybody listening, this is the no judgment zone, right?
Absolutely.
No judge. There is no wrong way to do this.
No.
The key is that we have a goal in mind. What tools will best help us hit those goals and fit with the plan that we're building for ourselves? So that's it. You choose what works for you.
Right. And what you're looking to get out of this exercise, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, brilliant point, John.
Now, conversely, if you are trying to crush discretionary spending and just nail it down, I think you're going to be frustrated with this manual exercise of looking at every account, unless we could just do like a no spend month, in which case a no spend month is very simple because you haven't spent anything, so there's nothing really to track.
Somewhat artificial, but
but is that really sustainable? And is that what your life actually looks like? Or is this like that 90-day diet you went on that you forgot about, on the other side? So there's the interplay there. But for those of you that really would like technology to help you, what's cool is now there's software available that will link to your bank account and to your credit cards, and they will pull in all of your transactions, and then they will either automatically assign a category when it's obvious, and the ones that aren't obvious, they will ask you for your input, and based on what you input, they will then continue to categorize it in the future. So each additional month that you go in and check in, it's requiring less input from you. And so you don't necessarily have to leave Google and Excel for these. This is where it's a very popular software that has popped up all over the place, and it's called Tiller Money. And this is a paid service. So here you need to understand, when you're talking about something that connects to your bank accounts and to your credit cards, there is just a parent company. There's probably a couple of them, but the main one is called Plaid. You don't need to remember that, but just know that no software company is just able to get access to your bank accounts and to your credit cards without going through an intermediate third-party service that has all the banking regulations in place. That company, the most popular one, is Plaid, and they don't give away that service for free. So all these third-party personal finance budgeting tools, and we're going to talk about YNAB here in a second, Tiller Money is another one, they're going through this third-party banking intermediate, and they have to pay a fee, a recurring monthly fee for that access, which they pass on to you plus an additional charge. So don't be surprised that for the convenience of having a software categorize all your transactions, be able to reach into your credit card company statements and your bank account statements, you're being charged for it because they have to pay for it and they need to make a profit on top of that. I just think that's like an important thing to realize if you want that level of convenience, with one exception that I'm aware of right now. And that is, so let me talk about two real quick. Tiller Money was the Excel and Google one. Or I believe it's actually on, I'll have to double check whether it's Google or it's Excel, but it is a spreadsheet and it can reach into your bank accounts. YNAB is another option, which is a software tool. It's very popular inside the personal finance and even the financial independence community. And what it does is it assigns a goal of saving an amount. It treats saving like an expense. You're allowed to set goals. And that's kind of bridging the gap for us where we don't think about saving money as just this extra thing. Like rather it's saving for the ultimate luxury, our time, right? So the idea of being able to create savings and set that as a goal allows you to target this idea of a zero-based budget. Every dollar is assigned a job. So it has a good mentality shift. But both of those, Tiller Money is around $7 a month. YNAB is in between $8 and $11 a month. I can't remember at the time of this recording. I've used various ones at various points of time. I've definitely used YNAB, and it's a very good software. It requires that you spend some time on it, right? If you're setting this goal of this zero-based budget where every dollar has a job, you're going to have to lean in and assign those goals, define what it is that you're trying to do and work towards that.
So in fairness here with this conversation, I personally, as I've talked about over the years, we don't necessarily budget. So I don't have a lot of personal experience with these softwares, Jonathan, but I know you have used many or most of them. And when it comes to YNAB, so most of the time that you're putting in, is it upfront setting those goals, or is it pretty consistent? Okay, this is going to take me an hour a month, or is it really, okay, the first time I log on or the first couple of times I log on, I really need to invest 5 hours or whatever it is, and then it gets easier from there? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to need to tell it what your goals are. But I would say just like, this conversation, we're going to do some work for this conversation I'm having with my wife in terms of arranging that's the perfect time. And then based on the other side of that, you go in with those goals and say, hey, we're planning on saving for a vacation, and we're going to need to have this amount of money. And so, and also we have all these variable costs like gifts. We're going to make sure we have this much money set aside every Christmas. So we're never stressed out by the amount of money we need to have set aside for gifts. And so you're able to plan out like we're going to need a new roof in 5 years. So we're going to have this amount of money saved. So instead of you worrying about how much money is in your bank account and just saying this lumpy, let's say you have $8,000 in your bank account, but in reality, all that money is earmarked. But when you see it in your bank account, it's just this monolithic 8,000 and you think you're loaded. But in reality, every one of those dollars has a plan, and you're making the choice to have those carved out for various things at various times. Every dollar has a job. We talked to Jesse, who is the founder of YNAB. It's episode 165 of our podcast, and he does a great job really explaining, the why behind that and why it has broken through the noise in such a tremendous way in the personal finance community. It's a great software, and it's great for goal setting. If you really want to visualize what your money is doing as opposed to just sitting there collecting zero interest, it's a phenomenal tool. Now, I talked about two paid ones, but now I want to come back and I'm going to talk about a free alternative as well. And that is Mint. That is Mint. And it is made by the same company that does TurboTax. So it's Intuit that makes it. And they offer Mint for free. So you could download Mint on your phone right now and set it and do it for completely free. Let's talk about first what it does really well. It's free, does that really well. And then two, it does. I just said that, Plaid charges for people to be able to go and access your statements. Mint does not. You can set up Mint for free and it can, go back and track all of your finances. I've noticed two bugs with it. One is that it just seems to occasionally break and just for whatever reason, not track suddenly like a whole week. And it's very frustrating if you're using for meticulous tracking of all of your finances and then suddenly like a week is off. Because it's free, it doesn't just seem to be supported as well, right? It doesn't seem to have they don't seem to care about it as much. And the other thing is the way they monetize it is just through ads, so it's free, but they show you selected offers for various financial products.
There's no paid version of it?
There is no, at least at the time that I was using it actively, there is no paid version of it. And I ended up migrating from Mint to YNAB, and I was happy with that experience. And I think the case for YNAB is, you're basically saying it is the price of 2 lattes a month. And because you're able to assign every dollar a job, you're going to more than out earn that just by squeezing peak efficiency out of your dollars. Goes back and forth. They're kind of working towards the same thing. I say Mint is perfect just for tracking. It really falls apart in its rule setting, goal setting, that sort of thing. If you just want to know how much you're spending in various categories, good. If you want to squeeze something else out of it, you're probably going to be more interested in something like Tiller or YNAB because you're going to be able to assign a lot more custom functionality based on your needs. And as you guys know, like in the financial independence community, our goals are kind of different than just generic personal finance. They're a little bit more aggressive and we just kind of think differently. And I would say that of all the ones I mentioned so far, Tiller and YNAB are probably the most closely aligned with our intermediate term goals. Now, moving right along here, just kind of worthy notes. Dave Ramsey. So many of you are probably familiar with Dave Ramsey and have probably heard about his envelope system. The envelope system was never really a big hit with me. And a lot of people that I know have kind of taken the ethos of that envelope system, which is you come up with a budget and then you just figure out how much you need for each category and then you pay yourself that inside certain envelopes. I mean, cash was kind of, a little bit interesting to use even 3 years ago. Today, I really have no interest in holding on to much cash and certainly not handling every expense around an envelope. And so I believe that maybe Dave Ramsey and company kind of caught up to that and they have created an alternative which implements kind of the ethos of those envelopes. And it's called Every Dollar. That's from the Dave Ramsey company.
So this is like an electronic envelope system?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like and there's another one that's kind of similar to that as well. It's called It's Your Money Deluxe Envelopes Excel System. So that's for people that want to do the envelope system, but more on Excel. There's that as well. I can't speak to either of those. I kind of stopped with the envelope system a long time ago. It just didn't scale for me personally as a personal thing. And but they're there. And just for the sake of disclosure, you could check those out as well. So these are the tool, Brad. I think it's worth mentioning just one more, and we haven't actually mentioned it in a while, but it's one I continue to use and one that I think most people should be aware of. Because as far as free tools go, there's tracking your finances, and then there's tracking your net worth, tracking your actual net worth. And so it doesn't fit cleanly into what we were just describing a second ago, but I think it's worth a mention, and that's personal capital.
Yeah, and Jonathan, you're right. We haven't mentioned this all that often on the podcast recently, but it is definitely a tool I know that you use. I definitely still have access to it and log in there occasionally. And it's funny because we actually talked about this in terms of one of our milestones of FI way back when, right? In terms of once you reach a certain net worth and you're connected to personal capital, you get the famous call. So it's kind of, oh, I made it type scenario. But I like personal capital because, yeah, as you said, it ties together both the income statement side, which again is my accountant speak for more or less like your budget with your net worth. And that's how I really think about my spreadsheets. So when I create my spreadsheets, it's doing both of those tasks. To me, I like to see kind of my point in time, right? So how much am I worth today? What are my assets? What are my liabilities? And therefore, what's my net worth? But also to have an idea of my income statement over a period of time. So I think that's more along the budgeting line. So I personally, as we talked about earlier, I do this via Excel, but personal capital is a really nice alternative for people who are looking to link up their accounts and have this kind of operate in the background.
Completely agree. And it's worth noting it is a completely free tool. It can integrate with both your bank accounts, but also with all of your, taxable investments and your retirement accounts. Again, bring all of those into one place. It has a bunch more functionality as well, including a pretty cool retirement calculator, but it's just one that you should be aware of. And if you haven't found anything like that, I mean, you can have, accounts spread all over the place. It can help you bring that together as a point of visualization. If you're interested in more information on that, you can go to choosefi.com/PC. P as in Paul, C as in cat. I've been using it for over a decade. Yeah, wow. Over a decade now. And it's one that will grow with you, and you'll be glad to be able to see all of that data. To imagine that compounding working for you, as opposed to when you're early in the journey and maybe you're paying off credit card debt and student loan debt and all these other things that, it feels like interest is working against you, to really recognize over time that your money is truly making money for you. It's becoming this third income earner in the home, working 24/7, a money making machine that can support you and your lifestyle for the rest of your life and probably beyond.
Yeah, that really is the most fun part about tracking your net worth over years and decades. We know compounding works conceptually, obviously, but then to actually see it on paper or on digital paper in this case, and see what happens when the returns are far outstripping what you're putting in every year, that feels like winning, right? That is the epitome of winning in a financial standpoint, as that compounding. And it's beautiful to see.
So, should you use a budget template? Well, I think it's going to depend. I think all of us at a various point in time should lean in and create at least the rudimentary version that we talked about earlier. Being able to put our financial life on a sheet of paper with something attributed to income, your expenses attributed, and then understanding what is the opportunity? What is that difference? Do I have any money left over? And then having a conversation with yourself or with your partner around what are your goals? And how can we make a better plan for what we want our money to do over the year? I really like depending on the complexity of your financial life, I really like the idea of getting to a point where we're making a decision around our retirement accounts and our pre-funded accounts. And some of us might be in the place where we can fully fund that and some of us aren't. That's fine. But to the degree that we all have an employer and we're taking advantage of retirement benefits, making that decision and then just moving on and almost ignoring that, and now saying, what is my take home pay? Right. So make a decision that you're comfortable with around your retirement accounts. Not that you're locked into that, not that you'll never put more in there or maybe decrease it a little bit, but making a decision, a blink test. You're like, I think I can do this. Let me just get it going and just get it going. Cause there's a chance, strike while the iron is hot. What if this isn't as important to you a few months later? If it's important to you at all, err on the side of saving too much and just get it done and then work out with what you have, left on the other side, right? So let's do that. And then now we have our take home pay. And once we get our tax filing, now we know, did we have to pay more to the government or did we get a refund? Now we can say, okay, now what does that look like over the year? How much actual take home pay do I have? Right? I really want to know what that take home pay is after you've made the decision to fund those retirement accounts. And I really want to know what that tax refund or that tax obligation was so we can adjust what that anticipated monthly income actually is. I understand there's some nuance. Some of you get paid biweekly. Some of you get paid monthly. Some of you get paid, bi-monthly. Like, let's try to estimate if we could smooth out what that income is going to be over the year, add into that the tax obligation or tax refund, divide by 12. That's our estimated monthly income. Let's come up with that number. Then let's try to really figure out what those structural core expenses are. Let's get all of that on paper, and then let's find out what the opportunity is. And you pick the budgeting tool or template that will allow you to get to that information quickly. And now let's come to an understanding. Brad, I'll give this back to you for your final thoughts, but I'd like to open the invitation for the audience that have gone through this exercise to let you know how it went in your weekly newsletter.
Yeah, that would be great. That is really the thing that I love most about just being on this podcast, Jonathan, is every single week when I write my newsletter that goes out Tuesday, you can get on there at choosefi.com/subscribe. I ask you, hit reply. Let me know what action you've taken. And this is a perfect example. What worked for you, right? It might be one of these tools. It might be something else that we didn't even realize existed. And that's what's beautiful about this being, as we've always called it, the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show, right? This is not just limited by our knowledge and our information. This is a rising tide lifts all boats scenario. And there might be something great out there that we just haven't even known about. Or we might find out that 80% of the community is using one of these tools and absolutely love it. That's the kind of information that I want. So definitely hit reply. It comes directly to me and I read every single one of those emails. So yeah, my last thought, Jonathan, is I love how you said the goal ultimately is what you're personally looking to get out of this and in your situation. Everyone's situation is different. So therefore, we can't come up with one specific, this is how you do this, right? Because everything about your life is going to be different than mine or Jonathan's or whoever's, right? But you need to figure out what works for you. For me personally, Jonathan, you hit on this, is simplicity. I'm looking for a simple financial life. And that to me means how can I put as much of this as possible on autopilot? And there are decisions, even something like you said in there, if you are in a fortunate enough position to lump sum invest for your 401k or your HSA, that's a decision whether you do that or not, right? You could dollar cost average all throughout the year and set up whatever it is, a $600 per month investment into your HSA. Or you could just put the full lump sum. Again, I don't have the exact amount, but let's say it's roughly $7,000 a year. You could just put it all in at one time and just never have to think about it again. That's what I do. I put it into my Todoist app, and on January, whatever the date is, I think I put it in for January 3rd or January 4th. Every year, I put all the money in there for the HSA, and I never have to think about it again. But for other people, they don't want to do that. They'd rather put in the dollar cost averaging every month. And I fully respect that. There's no right or wrong here. But you don't know what's right or wrong for your life until you have this conversation, until you go through this exercise. That's the critical part.
I got to tell you, I'm doing all the legwork. So what we're talking about right now is actually what I'm doing. I'm preparing for this conversation. It's going to happen over the next week or two. And I'm actually excited about it. I know my wife's been wanting a version of this for a while and it's fallen out of the habit. And I think, just like it's very easy to let complexity scare you away from this. But I feel like the year is just beginning for us in some small way. We're starting, we're on the other side of this. And I think this is just the perfect opportunity to really figure out what do we want our summer and our fall and our winter to look like? What do we want to tackle as a family? What do we want to not spend and save? Sure. But yeah, what do we actually want to spend that we're agreed on, about where our money, which everybody's on the same page, it represents your life energy. Where do you want your life energy to go? And, I hope that everybody gets as much fulfillment from, approaching this as I believe that we will as well. So we'll follow up in a couple of weeks. I'd love to hear from you. Take action on this. I think it will be an improvement for your life. I think it'll act as kind of a rock of stability for what your goals are, to have that sounding board and just really being a wonderful opportunity for all of us. All right, my friends, fire spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.